Coordinator at Local Government Professionals New South Wales. Today I acknowledge the Aboriginal people of the Darug clan, who are the traditional custodians of the land that I am on, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I extend that respect to any First Nations people joining us today. So just a little bit of housekeeping. If you could please ensure your microphone is on mute so that we have clear audio for all the presenters. However, you can, of course, unmute yourself to ask any questions, as we want to keep the session to be as engaging as possible. You all are also welcome to use the chat box at any time if you are a little bit shy, and we will get to all those questions. We also encourage you to update your name on Zoom with the council you are from and place any question, and of course, like I said, questions, comments, feedback that you have in the chat box. The session is being recorded and will be available along with the presentation afterwards. Okay, so just a little bit of an update from our side of things. It is that time of year again. Memberships are due for renewal. So this can be completed by logging into your profile on our website, or if you have questions on that side of things, you can reach out to our membership and communications manager, Isabel, through member@lgprofessionals.com.au. We also have a number of IPR events coming up, and we encourage you to take the time to look at our website for more information, such as our Integrated Planners Intensive in July, being held in Bathurst, and we have our conference in September, which will be held in Newcastle this year. We also have a brand new IPR LinkedIn group that we encourage you all to join. We'll pop the link in the chat section for you to join. That's pretty much everything from LG Professional side of things. I will now hand it over to Jeff Burton from the City of Sydney, who will run today's session. Over to you, Jeff.
Thanks, Kathy, and I'll just take control of the screen and hopefully you can see today's agenda. So as Kathy said, my name is Jeff Burton. I'm the Business Planning and Performance Manager here at the City of Sydney, and I'm also the Chair of the New South Wales Integrated Planners Network. And welcome to our mid-year IPR forum. We're online again. Hopefully our next planned few events are face-to-face, and we'll be planning, hopefully, crossing our fingers, for a forum in November, and we will perhaps see if we can do that as a face-to-face event. Just see how we're going with COVID conditions, flu, and anything else that the world throws at us in the next couple of months. All right, so even though it is virtual, we're still really keen for the network to network, and that's part of the aim of today. So we've got plenty of time for groups to discuss where we're up to with IPR, any questions or ideas, or hopefully some solutions you might have amongst yourselves. And then also you might be able to reach out and make some new acquaintances, colleagues and friends. So today we've got a bit of a network update. Perhaps we've got someone from OLG here. They're being impacted by a few illnesses at the moment. We'll then go into a breakout session, followed by a short rest break. And then we'll come back. I'll do a session on reporting, a bit of a refresher on progress reporting, and then we'll have general business at the end. So we've got the chat function. So if you've got questions, so we'll have people monitoring the chat as we go. So if you've got any questions, burning questions, put them in the chat so we don't miss them as we go along. All right, so I'll get started. So first of all, I'd like to introduce the committee, and going left to right on the top is myself, and then followed by Jenny Donaldson from Lake Macquarie, Karen Hawkett from the City of Sydney, Alison Berlin from Bland Shire, and then the next row, Ibby, who's, I believe, holidaying overseas at the moment, Jenny Gleeson from North Sydney, Ross Kingsley from Blacktown, and Catherine Parker, previously from Kempsey. So welcome to those from the exec that are joining us today, and they'll be helping out in the breakout sessions. So we've got plenty happening on in the network. First up on the events list, as Kathy mentioned, is the intensive. So the presenters are locked in, the content is locked in, the questions and the exams are all locked in. So what we want is some more people to come along. So if it's something you're considering, please reach out to LG Pro, ask a question, and see if you can come along. It's a great opportunity to network and really lift your IPR capability along the way, and you'll meet some great people as well. We're looking for a conference ideas in a survey. So LG Pro have issued a few emails in the last few weeks. One of the links has a link to a survey. We're building out the content for the conference, but we want to make sure that we're covering the content as relevant as much as we can for everybody. We're looking at Newcastle for that from the 7th to the 9th of September. And I believe early bird options are available now, and those links have gone out in the last few days. So if you haven't got one of those, you can go onto the LG Pro website and click through to the events and start the ball rolling. As I said before, we're looking for a November forum. Haven't quite decided whether it'll be online or face-to-face, but we'll worry about that as we get a bit closer. And then something that we're considering potentially for 2023 is perhaps copying something from our Victorian friends where they have an awards for their integrated planning documents, whether it's plans or reports for the different ones. And they've got a series of awards that they manage themselves. So we're just looking to see whether that's something that may be of interest, and we can get that working and see if we can get that up for 2023. So be interested on your feedback for that. All right, and I'm going to assume we don't have anyone from OLG. I don't think we do. So Karen Purser, who was really aiming to come to our session today, is very unwell and flagged her ability to not be able to come today. But in the interest on her behalf, I was talked through one key document that came out yesterday, which was an update from the Audit Office on local government for 2021. It mainly focuses on the finance parts of council, but there are some related items there that's probably worth having a look at in terms of asset management and the issues that are arising out of asset management, because we do coordinate asset management plans. So if your council is potentially nominated in any of those issues, perhaps it might be a good idea to make sure that those issues are followed up in the asset management plan for your council. All right, so we'll move along. So we'll gain back some time here, and what we might do now is see if we can go into our breakout session. So, oh, I think Karen's just joined us. Talk about timing. Hello, Karen, are you there? Karen Purser, are you online yet?
Yes, I'm here, sorry.
Oh, right, okay, all right. Well, I was on the assumption that you were not too well to join us, so thank you for joining us this morning. Was there anything that you wanted to add or provide an update to the group from OLG at this stage? I've just talked about the Audit Office released their review into local government for 2021 yesterday. It talked about mostly financial compliance. There was a touch on asset management, and there was a good section on cybersecurity and planning for IT in there as well. Was there anything else you wanted to add from an OLG perspective?
Sorry, no, we don't have any updates at the moment. On the asset management, we note that councils, some councils still have quite a bit of work to do, better aligning their asset management plans with their budgets. and the IPNR, but no, there's no update from us, but I'm happy to take questions if anyone has them. I have to say I've got a bit of COVID brain, so I may not answer them straight away. I may take them on notice and get back to you. So.
Yep. So we did ask for if anyone's got questions for you that they can pop in the chat, and we can catch up later and discuss those if they've got anything that's burning coming through that. So appreciate you turning up. So thank you. I hope you feel better soon. So I believe you might just stay on and listen along as we go. So
yeah, I will.
Appreciate that. All right. Thank you. So I can't see any questions coming through on the chat. So we'll move on to our breakout session. So what I wanted to do today is that for many of us, we're almost at the end of the line for our IPR activities for the year. We've still got a council meeting to go. I believe there's a few councils in the same boat. But I just wanted to have the opportunity to reflect back over the last few months. How's your IPR program progressed this year in terms of a normal year with the election, et cetera, but also with the new guidelines? Is there anything out of the guidelines that you felt you needed clarification or you didn't quite understand as well as it could be? Have you been able to comply with all the requirements as well? How have you gone with the new elements introduced perhaps around service review listing or talking about governance, the new measures, etc. So just curious on how to do that. So we're going to have a breakout session for about 30 minutes, and then we'll have an opportunity for about 5-10 minutes after that to just talk about some of the key issues from some of the rooms. So I'll look to our friends at LG Pro, who's going to put us into the breakout rooms. All right, I think we should all be back in the main room, so welcome back. Hope you had some quite interesting conversations, some maybe potential arguments, maybe. Not that we get upset at IPR. Did anyone want to quickly share any particular points? I mean, I can share a few from the group that I had. We talked around that being a compressed timeline with new councillors, that there was always going to be some sort of compromise. So some compromise perhaps on the resourcing strategy. Others are being compromised in terms of the level of engagement that they probably like to do, or the level of review or integration in their plans. We talked around the difficulty with new councillors, trying to get them to understand that the CSP is a community document and not necessarily one for the council itself. And we also had a suggestion around potentially if we're seeing that there's some level of confusion from councillors, that maybe it might be an opportune time in the next few months to do a councillor induction check-in and just check in to make sure that they're understanding what their roles and responsibilities are, not only perhaps in IPR, but in other elements of council's operations. So that was a great suggestion there. Did any other exec?
No,
yep,
sorry,
members
I'm just jumping over the top of you there, Jeff, which is, you know, given how tall you are, that's a pretty big ask. No, we had similar issues, similar concerns expressed. We were fortunate that we had Karen Purser in our group, and I did ask her the question about whether anybody needed to be concerned as to whether they ticked all the boxes in the new guidelines, and she said that the OLJ won't be knocking on anybody's door to wrap them over the knuckles if they haven't done everything. She said as long as they have a plan to adopt all of their documents, then that will be sufficient. The only thing was the budget is the one thing that needs to be well and truly signed off by the end of June, so which is nice to know. And for the OLG, they're hoping to get some feedback from people as to how the the process has worked for them. So if anybody's feels that way inclined, they can shoot Karen an email. I'm sure she'd like to hear your comments on the new framework and implementation process. But we also looked at look to the future and what some of the things that have been some opportunities that have arisen from this slightly curtailed period for the IPNR process. And one of the people in our group, I think it was Carol from Blacktown, was saying that they're looking at undertaking a debrief / review / evaluation a bit later in this year, just to see how things could have been done a bit differently, or where they can improve before they head off into starting the next, preparing for the next round of the IPNR process. One of the big challenges that a lot had was around the engagement, getting the community to actually be involved. And I'd suggest it's not just community. I think it's possibly also the council organisation itself. I think a lot of people, and I'm sure any of us who've been in this space for a little while know how hard it is to get people to see the relevance of integrated planning in councils. In my experience, actually having one-on-one discussions or small group discussions with people and actually involving them, which they should be, in identifying the tasks and actions for even at the operational plan level, I think helps to build that knowledge around where it all fits into the big picture. So, but I guess it's a process, and maybe in 10 years we'll all have it down pat, but who knows? So, but I'll let somebody else offer some views before we go to the break.
Thanks, Alison. I was going to talk from the group that I was facilitating as well. Yeah, I certainly agree with what Jeff had said. I think most people raised issues about the amount of work that had to be undertaken in often resource constrained councils to get not only the community strategic plan adopted, but also the other integrated plans, workforce plans, asset management plans, and then the combined DPOP. So, it was I think most councils, I think we had about 8 in our forum, reiterated that it was a lot of work, to get it over the line. And, some councils obviously had adopted the community strategic plan earlier, which helped them. Getting the DPOP with fees and charges and everything else through. A lot of councils are still waiting for their final documents to be adopted. The engagement with the community is important, but generally the community seem to focus on just a couple of things like fees and charges, rather than the suite or the actions or the strategies and the bigger picture. So that was another issue, not really understanding what it's all about, which is common. Then the issue about the councillors and the engagement in the 6 months that they've had to actually be elected has been a problem. And also it's a greater problem if you've got a completely new council, because obviously the whole IPR reporting is double Dutch to a lot of them. So they're challenges, I think, that need to be recognised from the Office of Local Government. The question about service reviews, I asked that question, Jeff, and seeing whether councils had undertaken service reviews, and I think there was 1 out of our 8 or 9 councils that had actually undertaken service reviews. So, I think there's a lot of learning still to be undertaken in the service review space with councils. And if they've undertaken service reviews in the past, it's probably been internal. Some of the bigger councils may have more resources to do this and may be able to share, and that's an opportunity for the network. I think going forward to be able to share experiences and provide that best practice, if you like. So there's some of the key things that I got as a takeaway. And I think well done to everyone who's gotten their IPR suite through. It's a heck of a lot of work. That's me.
I think similar in the group that I was involved in, the compressed election cycle presented a unique set of problems, I guess. For example, the usual process of perhaps inducting your councillors early was a struggle because of the compressed time. And there's a lot of time spent on inducting them on governance and how committees are run, and that sort of that information. That meant that any workshopping on specific IPR was left later, and not as much time could be devoted to that. One of the great ideas that came up in our group was from Sutherland. They have what they call a summer reading pack, which typically they would send out a draft budget and a draft of capital projects to the new councillors when they're developing their operational plan, which of course this time around couldn't be done because there wasn't the time allowed to do that with the election not being held until December. Some other issues that came up is where there was external factors that were impacting on decision making and diverting staff resources to those matters, which spread the resourcing quite thin across the council, and having that understanding of financially where they were sitting, waiting for the external factors to be dealt with, which again caused issues with resourcing. There's also a discussion around integration with other areas of the council, and this is, I know, something that we discuss a lot, and how we can better connect with our finance teams, for example, and our asset managers. And there's a few ideas that we shared in that group to try and help in that regard. There's also a comment that face-to-face engagement was a challenge, and even where full-blown engagement wasn't required for the review process, there's still a lot of work to be done in researching and validating anything that assisted in, forming a position for the council. So again, resourcing came out as a big concern. And then, of course, the IPART decision came in quite late and created some challenges to deal with that in a very short period of time.
Okay, thank you, Karen and Catherine, for sharing for that. We're sharply approaching 11 o'clock, so we've scheduled a short 5-minute, 10-minute break, I think, just so you can get up and stretch your legs, get a glass of water and do what you might need to do. So I think we'll come back, if we can, at 11:05. So if you want to go stretch your legs, get a glass of water, make a quick cup of tea or coffee, we'll start back at 11:05. I'll come back with a refresher on reporting, and then we'll go to general business and close up from there. All right, so we'll see you soon. Thank you. All right, 11:05, welcome back. We might get started. Assume everyone's back. All right. we'll move on from coffee cups. All right. So the next session I'll be running, it's just a bit of a refresher on integrated planning reporting. So it's about the R in IPNR. And really, I just want to cover off a couple of things. What are the reporting guidelines and requirements that are in the latest issued set of guidelines from OLG? What are the options for reporting, and what practices work best for you? Because what might work really well for one council will probably not work in a different council. So just want to make sure that people are not getting too overly anxious around the type or the style or the way that you do your reporting isn't the same as everyone else. All right, so as I said before, if you've got questions as we go along, you can pop them in the chat. Very surprisingly, we have no questions in there at the moment. So I hope that we'll be able to answer your questions as we go through. All right, so the latest guidelines from OLG talk to a hierarchy. These are the respective elements from the guidelines when it comes to measures and reporting for the CSP, the DP and the OP. And so I've clipped those out of the guidelines. There's a real focus on the assessment of progress using some means like measures that are required to have a hierarchy and flow for each level of the plans and infers a hierarchy of some sort. And you can see that I've underlined some of the key words. Achieved, objectives are achieved, methods of effectiveness, which is for the DP and the OP as well. So maybe a question for those today, do you think that a community satisfaction survey is a measure of your effectiveness alone? Is that enough? How many of you use a community satisfaction survey in your progress reporting? Do you use that at all? And is it a worthwhile indicator, you think, of that? So you can certainly put that in the chat as we go along. This diagram here, I've tried to show the hierarchy of measures through the hierarchy of reports. And so it is a little bit complicated, and I admit I've put it together in the last week or so. So I do apologise, it may not be as clean as possibly I'd like it, but hopefully it's good enough for illustration purposes today. All right, so on the left-hand side, you can see the community strategic plan, the delivery program, the operational plan. Each of those are required to have some way to measure their effectiveness or the development or progress for those actions. And in the middle, you can see I've got an example going from the high level outcome of a reduced climate temperature, talking about air quality and amenity, and then down at the delivery program where you might have a target for planting trees to cool suburbs. You might have a target of say 5,000 trees or whatever the number might be. And then the operational plan, you might have what's that progress for that year. So you might have over 4 years a target of 10,000 trees. So maybe you've got 2,500 trees to plant each year. And then for those councils that perhaps have a service plan or a business unit plan, you might have measures in those that relate to that program. And you might also have staff performance plans, which may have those actions shown in those individual performance plans. And so that would be very minor and quite discrete there for those measures. On the right-hand side, you can see the different plans that we've got. So we've got the state of the shire or the city that we'll be doing for the second council meeting after the next election. And then you've got the annual report, which we do every year. And then we've got quarterly or biannual progress reports. And then under that are potentially organisational measures. You might have an organisational dashboard for say reporting on certain elements or measures within your operational plan or other things not in your operational plan. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. Okay. So I can see we've got a few questions. So comments back there, community survey is just one way to measure effectiveness. Yet It's a measure of effectiveness, but not enough in isolation. Yeah, I agree. Use it in conjunction. Agree. Yes, you will get access to the slide deck, Rachel. And Aubrey uses customer satisfaction surveys and measurement for success. Yep. And Strathfield uses annual survey that uses other sources. Yep. Resilient platform resource data. Excellent. Okay. All right. So the reason I asked that is that we're starting to explore what would a performance management framework look like for local government. And I think that community satisfaction is an important element, but it's not the only element that we should consider going through. So thank you for those submissions there in the chat. I'll just keep moving through. So this is the example table of contents for progress reporting out of the handbook. It talks to the purpose of that report, an executive summary, and then has for each theme highlight major projects and programs, delivery program, the indicators, operational program indicators, something about financials, and repeats that for the various themes. What do people think about that? Is there anything missing from that? For us, we tend to do the highlights in our actual council business paper. We don't have it in that particular report, but we certainly address it in the council business paper. And then all the details are in the attachment.
Yep.
Just moving through. This is the, I guess, the fact sheet in the handbook around delivery program progress report. So the obligation is that it needs to be at least every 6 months. And what is interesting around the fact sheet here is that this time OLG have included a few items dealing with exception reports, and we're just going to delve into that now. And so this is the clip out of that handbook talking about exception reporting. So rather than reporting on every element, it talks to the notable highlights for that 6-month period, the ratio of projects, programs and services on target versus the total number of project programs and services. And so you probably might be looking at an 80% on track or completed as a ratio that you might be looking towards. And then you would then detail the projects and programs that are not running to time or budget. So you probably do those in detail. And then an explanation as to why those things might not be running to program. So interested to see how many actually do a exception report. I think this is a copy from Kempsey Shire. It's an exception report which talks to a couple of items that are behind schedule, and it's got a comment. So it's quite clear and easy for the community and the councillors to understand the actual project, when it's due by, it's behind schedule, but the reasons for it and the remediation for it. But I'm also interested to hear broadly around what are the benefits of doing an exception report. There may be some great benefits there, but it might also take you longer to complete. And does the culture of the council or the councillors actually endorse that? Are they okay just to know about the exceptions? And then that got me thinking around, well, how do we define what are those exceptions? What makes an exceptional report? What goes into the exceptional report? So there needs to be a set of criteria that would be fairly well managed to make sure that that exception report is showing some exceptions. All right. So I'm just going to now move on and just give you a few highlights of a few elements that I did of a review back in 2019. So apologies for those that have seen this. I have changed it around a little bit, so it's not exactly the same. But for those that are new to IPR, you might not have seen these slides before. So just going through the different elements and components and variety that we've got for progress reporting across councils in New South Wales. So we might think that it's a simple task, but quite unsurprisingly, we do name our progress reports differently. And here's a couple of examples where we've got a description talking about delivery program at the top right, half-yearly progress report, and then a quarterly review of the operational plan, a 6-monthly performance update. So again, it doesn't necessarily matter what we call it, but it adds to the confusion about what we are perhaps reporting back on. So if we have inconsistent naming across the industry, maybe we're not absolutely clear about what it is that we're reporting on. And I think it's quite reasonable to understand that, because the guidelines talk about reporting back on the delivery program, but we're actually in an operational plan and also reporting on that at the same time. So what did I find when I did have a look? There are different reporting styles. You can see different text boxes. Some are just straight text boxes in a table layout. That's quite popular and probably the most popular. There's some different layouts that use it as a kind of a newspaper layout. They treat it as like an easily consumable product rather than tables and figures to read. And quite many of the reports also have photos of completed events or projects that always helps for the readers to consume it. Having said that, there's quite a few of those reports that don't have any measures at all. It's just a narrative and doesn't necessarily give you a sense of things being progressed or not progressed, or perhaps some numbers. So there is a variety of styles that are used. Again, I'm not saying one is better than another. I'm just talking through the different varieties and styles that I've seen. Pardon me. And so not only is the content different, but also is the graphic treatments. There is a variety of effort that's put into the report. So some are quite well put together, color photographs, color text, some advanced typesetting, icons that are used to really make the reports look well and make it easier to read, and others that are perhaps more simple, but still telling the message. And that's the main thing, is making sure that the outcomes are being reported and the progress is being reported. Not only do you see a variety in the content and the style, but also in the type of reports. In some councils, they produce departmental type reports. So you might get a report from the engineering group, and that's a separate report from the planning group, which might be different from the health and environment group. And so they're not necessarily put to council as a consolidated report. Quite often, the QBRS, or the financial statements for the quarter, or for the 6 month, depending on what quarter it is, in a separate report. And so again, it's not being integrated with the financials and operational performance of council. Having said that, there was one council that I find that they did a comprehensive report every month to their council. So that was certainly on the good, better, best scale. I think that was on the best scale, and it's probably providing their councillors the information that they wanted. Again, that was a situation for that council. As I said before, there's quite often a variety of styles used. And when we come to summary of our progress, you can see here a couple examples of the summaries, quite different styles. Pie graphs are quite common, as you can see. And I'd draw your attention to the one on the top right, which puts together both capital projects and operating projects into the same graphic. So that's quite a unique approach to consolidate all that information into one graph. So that's great. You'll also see on the left-hand side some icons there, and statuses, and so that really explains where the progress is going across the summary. All right, so in terms of status types, I did find a fairly large variety of status types. So when I talk about status, it's where in the progress report, you're saying that things are on track or complete or off track, simply. So most councils have around 4 types of status. There are different status or icons for services and measures and for projects. So you would find that you've got a different way of explaining how projects are being managed as opposed to services, and that's quite reasonable. The highest number I found was 10, and you can see that as the example down the bottom here. And that combined not only the operational status, but also financial status for those services or programs as well. The lowest number I could find was 3, but again, that had a double meaning. One of the statuses was completed or on track. So it was a bit hard to tell which things are completed or which things are on track by that status alone. There's probably looking at the narrative to tell you that story. Most of the reports use some sort of color, whether it's for the type of status. So if it was off track, it might be red, or for the type of principal activities. So you might have green for environment and blue for planning, for example, or some other color scheme. And most reports had a legend or explanation. So that's also very useful. It's a bit hard to understand what the status is if you don't have a legend or explanation for that status in your report. So when it comes to color, I did see some variety there as well. So the common ones was red, amber, green, but I did see blue and black and gray being used. As you can see, some of the items have different meanings. So for some, green meant on track or green meant complete, and blue meant on target, for one example. So we do have a variety of approaches, but again, make sure that that's what works for your council. When it comes to icons, there was, again, a variety of approaches. I think it's representative of each council that we do approach this differently, but it's quite reassuring in one way that we approach it differently for our needs for council, but it's probably also useful to see what others are doing to see if we can improve the way that we report. So example might be over here on the right. So we've got icons for KPI status, and we use some of the same icons for action status as well. So using icons, not necessarily just colors to tell the story, and others have a more fuller description of their status for the progress. So looking at all the reports across councils, I consolidated them into what I would call an example master list. So if you were to put together a list of all the status types that you could use to describe a status for a particular project or program, these are the ones that I came up with. So it's probably the complete list. We might push that out at the conference and see if we can see if there's anything else we can add, and start to work up maybe a template for progress reporting, or an example template for progress reporting as an idea. I've put together what I think is a bit of a checklist. Now is a great time to start thinking about our reporting. Once we get our plans adopted, of course, we might have a bit of a breather to start looking at how we're going to report to our council. As we said before, many councils have new councillors, so it might be an ideal time to walk them through how we do reporting and then get their feedback and make sure that the report that they're getting is as clear as possible for them. So it might be just a bit of a checklist yourself, and to just go back and check how you did the last quarter or this quarter report, and how you're going to do it in the next 6 months or so. I guess the thrust is, how do you make it easier for everybody, is what I'm trying to find. So I've got some ideas here on maybe improving process design around progress reporting. So many councils use a system, some use Excel and email, and that's great because each council will have their own size and scale issues to think about. You don't want to use a sledgehammer to knock a pin in, and you want to have the right tool for the right problem. So we use a central email account. So if we've got a team of people, whoever comes in, they can use that same account if people have queries to internally for their progress reporting. Instead of having a personal account, you can have a centralized account. We send an email out alerting people beforehand. Are you checking what you did last year before you do the reporting for this year? Do you have any graphs? And you can see over here on the right hand side a really good example of a narrative and then a graph showing you the facts, the visitor numbers for the last couple of years, split by every 6 months, gives you the story of what's happening with that. And down the bottom you can see use of an infographic giving a story around, in this case, roads. And also, do you have a quick guide for new starters? So we've got a few ideas here for quick guides. So as you get new people that come along, they might not be familiar with what IPR is and what they have to do. Can you give them some ideas on how to actually write their narrative? And here's a couple of quick ideas that we've got for that. But also ask us all to start really thinking around our progress reporting. Are you really integrating with your financials and your operational reports? To really start to think around integrating the results of the performance of council and the financial results into the one report if you're not doing that already. Start to think around how we're going to report on service reviews. How will you do that in a particular council report? Will you just wait until Q4 next year to do a report back on service reviews? Will you do it every quarter? How would you do that? So start thinking around how you'll do a report back on your program. For many councils, they're starting that journey. So how will you report back on how you're going on your journey? How can you show that your measures are linking from your CSP to the DP and OP? Can you show a hierarchy or a tree for your measures to support this outcomes in the CSP? Might also be a good idea to start thinking around, if you haven't already, about your measures. I did hear from one council saying that they're doing a workshop with their managers around how they're going to measure and manage the operational plan. So it might be a good idea to have a master sheet, which also breaks it into a time. So is it going to be recorded monthly, quarterly, annually? Maybe you just get data at the census, which is coming out very soon. Or is there some other timescales that you use to say that you've got those timescales that you may be able to use when it comes to the State of the Shire, State of the City report in a couple of years' time. And the other thing to do, if you haven't already, is see if you can have a quick read of the 2018 Audit Office report on service delivery. They focus on service delivery, not necessarily strategic outcomes. So it is slated a little way to, from an economic efficiency point of view, about services, but it's probably not a bad read for people to read if you haven't seen that before. There's quite a number of good tips there for councils to use. So that kind of starts to look at around what we should be doing in terms of mandatory, but what goes on beyond our mandatory requirements? Are you thinking around other measures that perhaps relate into other strategic documents? Certainly in Sydney, we've got the Greater Cities Commission, they've got a metro strategy, and they've got targets in that we're obligated to be progressing and heading towards, whether it's the urban tree canopy or reducing the tons of CO2 per person. And there's also reporting for, DA processing times of library borrowings, et cetera, So start thinking around those other strategic goals and obligations to other state government departments. And there's also the Premier's priorities as well, that I believe is being revised, but we're yet to see what that looks like. And I guess lastly, what's the next iteration of IPR? And this is not for us to think about in the next few months, but longer term. We do these plans for asset management and workforce strategy, but we don't have an obligation to report back on them. And so I'd just like to start thinking around what would that look like? Should we be doing that? What would that look like without creating an unnecessary burden on the organisation? and going from there. So I will leave it there. So sorry if it feels a little bit rushed. Haven't had the amount of time that I'd like to prepare these slides and have a proper presentation, but just something to start the conversation around progress reporting. But I'm happy to take any questions, particular through the chat, or if anyone wanted to unmute, they had any particular questions or comments. Did you find that useful? Did you learn anything? You want me to shut up, which I'm happy to do.
Jeff, I know that I'll just jump in just to the question. I know Karen just said that she's left, which is unfortunate, but I was interested in what the latest info on a performance management framework was. And is that just radio silence from OLG?
I can't really talk for OLG. I know that they are reviewing that at the moment. There are some talks going on to that at the moment. I can't really say much more than that at this stage. So it's definitely a project with some life. I guess the difficulty is the amount of resourcing that could be allocated towards that from the OLG side. So we're looking at alternative ways to perhaps get that up and running.
Are they looking at a benchmarking? Is it for benchmarking?
I don't know the exact outcome, but as you might remember from the previous attempts, it's been around benchmarking performance so that each council would have the same measure and you would report back on it. That's one of the considerations, I guess. Yeah,
because I was involved, as I mentioned before, developing the Victorian one. So there's a lot of good lessons learned, and there's been audit reports on that. There's also the really good one in Scotland that's done. But I also think that they need to consider in the UK when they brought them in and why they took them out. So just for those big learnings, I think they'd save themselves a lot of time. I think there's a lot of really good work in that. And I also think that they're asking us to do service reviews where we'll be reporting service level measures and creating our own. And some of those are useful for the other work. So then we kind of will go around doing that, and then they'll ask us to add more. It just is creating more work for us. Do you know what I mean? So I think they need to get their act together.
Yeah, and that's right. And that's why there's some discussions that are taking place as to what's the level of burden. So for me, I've got a couple of key things I'd love out of this. One would be to reduce the overall reporting burden on councils, because we report to a number of different departments, different times of the year, state and federal. Two, it's quite hard to then get that data back out and then compare yourselves with other councils. That should be a lot easier. And three is that we need a platform to be able to, I guess, enable community/councillors/ GMs plus staff to be able to manage our performance. And I'm not quite sure that we're there yet. We're well on the journey, but without repeating the errors of other organisations and entities around the world and Victoria.
I agree.
Well, I think the Victorian one's worked really well, I think. The councils have, but I know that in developing them, there's a lot of services you just can't compare. So you've just got to concentrate on what you can. And the other component that we added was a governance checklist, which I think, because there's a lot of councils that, and I think New South Wales might find it useful. In fact, I think it came from New South Wales originally, from some department, but in the documents and things that councils should have, because some of the smaller councils I know sometimes, or even some of the bigger councils, sometimes struggle to get their organisations to do some of these things.
Yep.
I agree with that, Fiona. Yeah. I was just going to make a point. So I've come from Premier's Priorities, and one thing I thought was really effective when we did Premier's Priorities under the previous Premier was that we're able to get the reporting down to one page. And I was quite, and as I've sort of shared with some colleagues here today, I'm quite new to local government. So I was very interested to see the volume of work required for our strategic planning and reporting. And I'm not surprised that it's difficult for all of us to try and achieve this. So as a consideration, it would be good to have some, if we can get to a point at some stage where there is a little bit of standardisation and simplicity, so it becomes an exec one-page report. Obviously, there'd be detail behind that in other documents, but I think that would be a really great outcome. And as you say, Fiona, taking the learnings from Victoria and also across the world, particularly around service delivery measures, and actually assessing what is your service delivery, what is that service catalogue. My final point is, if you take that customer-centric view, I think it enables a lens to simplify.
I also, one of the big focuses for the Victorian framework was also to streamline reporting. So it's worth having a look at their discussion papers and things that they developed, but they're quite old. We could improve on that. But that was one of the big key focuses on that. I totally agree with that. There's a lot of and that's where the Stacey Barr pump helps, because it is about focusing what's our most important, but it's more about continuous improvement. It doesn't necessarily cover everything, but that's a really good, it's different to the RBA because it's actually is a methodology about getting the best performance measures for things. But then again, that's, for your council, what's important for your council might not be for others. So the service, the ones we benchmark in, what I'm saying is that set should not be overwhelming. It should just be really practical. And I just think we can take a lot of start with what other councils have done and just review and test them. It'll save a hell of a lot of time. There's been a lot of work done by that. You can see the Scottish one used a lot of the Victorian stuff.
Yep, totally agree. And the other thing I want to ensure that it's scalable. So I'm not expecting the smaller councils to have the same level of resources and the same level of ways to measure service because it's probably just not possible. So not trying to put an extra burden on those that perhaps don't need that level.
Well, basically, they just do all that for you. But have a working party, and it takes time for iterations, but they actually come up with how you do it. They come up with the whole methodology, the whole templates and everything. So all you have to do is plug in the data. And it's really simple.
Very, very supportive. And I would also suggest consideration of the deliverability methodology which came out of the UK government, which was about simplifying and actually having really clear targets. So if you're going to put a working group together, I would love to participate. I reckon that'd be great.
Yeah, I too. I think you've got to do that. I think that's one thing. I think you need to have people that know what they're doing and also get some external experts on it too. People like someone like Mark Hopnell from Pump would be great. I think that would be someone. The Productivity Commission, I know they did a paper about service, which is where some of the discussion started, and their model around doing service reviews or measuring services was really useful, which I think is in one of the discussion papers. But yeah, there's a lot of the stuff done. They don't need to reinvent the wheel, and I suggest that they actually go out and get a good working group who, using this network and do their thinking rather than just have bureaucrats do it.
Just as a
Ouch.
Sorry, I've just seen fail. It just fails if they do it. We know that. It's got to be a mix.
Thanks, Fiona. Ross, did you want to have a...
Sorry, just a quick comment on that. Don't disagree with anything that Fiona said then, except the term they, because there is no they in New South Wales. So if there was to be a working group, or work progressed on this, it would come from the people on this meeting and their allies. And the question is where it goes, even if we came up with something really good, or just said adopt the Victorian framework, or adopt the Victorian framework with these changes. Whatever it might be, where does it go and how does it go anywhere? Because there won't be any leadership from OLG in New South Wales. We've got to recognise that reality. So as a collective of local government sector, we'd have to figure out how we could actually progress something that would become useful rather than just a model on a shelf.
Well, if they want it, they've actually led the regulation. They actually do need to lead it, and they need to use us as subject. Well, it's not going to fast then. You need to have that central leadership to do it and to actually have the resources to do it, to run that. And one of the things they did in Victoria too was actually run and pay for the customer satisfaction survey, the questions that they've got in every year, because they realise that smaller councils can't afford to do that. So if they're going to do it properly, and maybe we need to wait until, if there's a Labor government, they might put more money into it. But I think that's why they've struggled a lot. If you look at the Victorian government, they actually have and Queensland and Western Australia, they have really good guidelines around the whole IPNR stuff, have done for a long time. I think what these guys have done is good. I don't know about the level of testing it before they put it out, though. I think that would have been helpful.
Okay, all right. Thank you for those insights from Rachel and Fiona and Ross there. We're approaching 11:45. Did anyone else have any general questions, general business that they wanted to raise for the network? Have I missed something? As I said before, we're looking to move over to the LinkedIn group over the next weeks and months, so it'll take a little bit of while to move over. Trying to look to put some files and some necessary guidance or templates that we've had before in the Facebook and other events, to put those into the LinkedIn group. All right, no other general questions?
Oh, sorry, Jeff. Thanks so much for your time this morning. I only was able to jump on the last hour of it, but it's been really, really good. Quick question about the upcoming IPNR conference.
Yep.
Really keen. I know that you're still nutting out what is going to be involved. Is there going to be stuff on service area reviews? And I'm just wondering if that's going to be.
Do you want stuff on service reviews? Because that's, for me, I think we just need to make sure that as many councils as possible are comfortable with how to run the program, what a program looks like, and how it may integrate into IPR. I think it's quite valuable. You can learn how to do a service review, and hats off to LG Pro, because they've done a number of service review training sessions around the state over the last couple of months. So hopefully those that have been able to get to those have been. But there's so much more, I think, to do and learn. So it's definitely on the radar. As I said, if you want to complete the survey, Isabel's just popped it into the chat. Please fill that survey out, because it really helps us refine the conference agenda. Otherwise, we kind of do it and put our finger in the air and think, oh, we think this is going to work, but we'd really like some feedback. We can't obviously do everything. Time is a concern, and we can't, get leading experts on motivation, inspiration, etc. coming. Not at the price points that we're talking about, but we're certainly trying to make it useful. We always try to make sure we've got a couple of workshops so that we can gather the expertise across the group, enable people to learn more as well.
Cool. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Michelle. Great. So I'll be looking to see at least 40 survey responses by the end of tonight. I know we're all busy, but I'll extend it till Sunday. I've got a week's holiday in another week or so, so I'll be looking to put the conference agenda together as a draft over that period in the next couple of weeks. So thank you. Suzanne, did you want to raise something? You're on mute.
I think the moment's gone. I was just going to raise something of interest, because we were talking about being customer centric when we were talking about performance reporting, and we did something a bit different in our delivery program that I was just going to pop in the chat, because we spent a lot of time getting our indicators aligned with our LSPS and, metro plans and all the rest of it. But if you put something like what I've just put in the chat there in a delivery program, it can be it's hard for the community to understand. So we spent some time putting in the CSP and our DP a sort of plain English version of what that means. And so if the community was reading it, they wouldn't be sort of boggled by reduce waste to landfill equals 46% and stuff like that. And so we spent a little bit of time doing that. And what it actually did was, in the reverse sense, it helped us come up with better indicators, because we were putting them in plain English. We figured out how to measure them, if you know what I mean, sort of thing. Yeah.
And I did see that. I've been having a sneak peek at a couple of councils as they put their stuff out. So I did take note of that. So thanks for sharing that, Suzanne. The performance management framework is complicated because I think we've got a whole range of different stakeholders potentially using it. And I think trying to have one product that serves all of those stakeholders is going to be quite hard. So we've got state government potentially want to look at how councils are being run. Are they being run efficiently? Are we losing money, making money? Are we delivering what we should? We've got the community who maybe want to compare and contrast different councils. We've got OLG who want to make sure that we're doing things in a compliant way, but also efficiently. And then we've got potentially media and news and other elements that maybe want to cast dispersion on how councils are going, and it's quite easy to use these metrics in an adverse way rather than a positive way as continuous improvement. So they're all kind of considerations of a wider performance management process. So, but I agree, having something that talks to the community and consumed by the community is so important. We're bureaucrats, and as someone said before, we can understand measures and progress reports, but majority of the community don't. They want a happy, healthy community, and that's what they want. So, all good. Thank you very much. All right, I'm going to take last call.
I was just going to ask whether there's any alignment with Social Impact Measurement Australia or Social Impact Measurement International and their framework of measures, especially now that the university's put together a pretty easy to use template. I think it's New South Wales Uni.
Yep. So there's the broader context about wellbeing indicators as well. So that should line in with our longer term CSP and delivery program outcomes that should go into our State of the City Shire reports as well. So that's certainly on the table. So service metrics is one thing, customer satisfaction is one thing, broader wellbeing is another. And then we've got these other strategic outcomes that might be to a state government objective, like a Premier's priorities for education or domestic violence that we're perhaps contributing to, not totally responsible for, that we should also be reporting on. So it's quite a broad spectrum of things. As I said before, there's quite a number of different stakeholders. I think the spectrum is quite wider than perhaps what OLG were looking at a number of years ago, but we've got to start somewhere. We can't just say, oh, we need to do all of this. Otherwise, we'll still be here in another 10 years thinking and talking about it. So it's really about having a bit of a plan around it and then trying to tick off some of those barriers and challenges, having someone to lead it, having resources, having engagement with the sector, and then being able to use it constructively. They're the things that I'm trying to push along. So. Happy to engage others when we get to that stage, but it's early days at this stage. So thank you. All right. I think on that note, there's no other last bids or questions. I will bid my farewell now. Hope to see you at the conference only a couple of months away. Please complete the survey. It really will help us put together an outstanding conference and make it the best that we can for you, because that's what we're trying to do. So thank you. Good luck with those that are still getting your IPR plans yet to be adopted. Thanks for your time today. I know it's a busy period of time. Thanks to LG Pro for hosting and coordinating, and thanks for my fellow exec for helping out in the breakout rooms.
And Jeff, thank you to you for all the hard work that you put into the network, because I'm sure most people who, although still on the call, possibly wouldn't be aware of how much of your downtime is spent keeping us all honest in the IPNR space.
Well, I won't say honest, but let's keep going. All right.
Thanks, Jeff.
Happy to help. Thank you all. Thanks for attending.
Bye.
See you later. Bye. See you soon.
Bye.